The Grand Chamber of the Empire was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. It stretched for 3 kilometers in every direction, and its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. The floor was made of polished black stone that reflected the light of 1,000 floating crystals. Every surface was designed to make visitors feel small and weak. Today, the chamber was full. Representatives from over 2,000 conquered worlds stood in their assigned sections, watching and waiting. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had bodies made of living metal or gas contained in magnetic fields, but they all had one thing in common. They all belonged to the Empire now. At the far end of the chamber, raised above everyone else, sat Emperor on his throne of living crystal. The throne was not just a seat. It was a creature, bonded to the Emperor's bloodline for 10,000 years. It pulsed with soft light, and sometimes it whispered secrets that only could hear. The Emperor himself was ancient beyond counting. His species, could live for thousands of years, and had ruled for most of that time. He had 4 eyes, each one a different color, and his skin was the gray of old stone. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the chamber without any need for amplification. "Bring forward the human," he commanded. The crowd parted and a single figure walked toward the throne. His name was Park, and he was the official ambassador of the human species. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair at his temples and a calm, pleasant face. He wore a simple gray suit with no decorations, no medals, no signs of rank or power. He had come alone. No guards walked beside him. No warships waited in orbit to protect him. He carried no weapons that the Empire's scanners could detect. He was just one man, walking through a room full of beings who could crush him with a thought. And yet he did not seem afraid. The representatives from the conquered worlds whispered among themselves. They had all stood where this human was standing now. They remembered the fear, the desperation, the hopeless knowledge that resistance was impossible. But this human walked like he was taking a pleasant stroll through a garden. Ambassador Park stopped at the proper distance from the throne and bowed his head slightly. It was a gesture of politeness, not submission. The difference was small, but everyone in the chamber noticed it. "Human ambassador," Emperor said, his 4 eyes fixed on the small figure before him. "You have been given 3 opportunities to accept the terms of integration into the Empire. You have refused all 3 times. Explain yourself." Smiled politely. "Your Eminence, humanity is grateful for the Empire's interest in our species. However, we have decided that we prefer to remain independent. We hope this will not damage our friendly relations." A sound moved through the chamber. It was not quite a gasp, not quite a laugh. It was the sound of 2,000 species simultaneously failing to believe what they had just heard. No one refused the Empire. It simply was not done. They had conquered civilizations that spanned entire star clusters. They had defeated species that had been traveling between stars when humanity's ancestors were still living in caves. Their war fleets numbered in the millions, and their technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic to younger species. Refusing them was not brave, it was insane. Emperor leaned forward on his throne and the living crystal pulsed with a darker light. "You prefer to remain independent," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "Tell me, human, do you understand what the Empire is? Do you comprehend what you are refusing?" "I believe so, Your Eminence." "Then you understand that your species has no hope of resisting us. Your territory encompasses 47 star systems. We control 47,000. Your military consists of a few hundred patrol ships. We have war fleets that could darken your sun. You have been a spacefaring species for 3 centuries. We have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years." Nodded calmly. "Those numbers are accurate, Your Eminence." "Then why do you refuse?" The human ambassador was quiet for a moment, as if considering his answer carefully. When he spoke, his voice was still pleasant and calm. Because we do not wish to be ruled. It is really that simple. Emperor made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had contained any warmth. You do not wish to be ruled. How charming, how delightfully naive. He raised one hand, and the chamber fell absolutely silent. Even the floating crystals seemed to dim. Humanity has been given every opportunity to join the empire peacefully. You have chosen to reject our generosity. Therefore, by my authority as Emperor of the Empire, ruler of 10,000 worlds, master of the galactic core, I declare war upon the human species. The words echoed through the chamber, and the representatives from the conquered worlds lowered their heads. They knew what was coming. They had seen it before. You will have 30 cycles to reconsider, continued. If you do not surrender unconditionally before that time expires, our fleets will enter your territory. We will destroy your defenses. We will occupy your worlds. And if you still resist, we will reduce you to ash and scatter your species across the stars as slaves. The Emperor's eyes burned with cold fire. This is not a threat, human. This is a statement of fact. It is what has always happened and what will always happen. The strong rule, the weak submit. This is the natural order of the universe. For a long moment, nothing moved. The chamber held its breath, waiting for the human to break, to beg, to finally show the fear that he should have been feeling from the very beginning. Ambassador Park did something else entirely. He chuckled. It was not a loud sound. It was soft, almost gentle, like a grandfather amused by a child's innocent mistake. But in the silence of the grand chamber, it was like a thunderclap. The representatives stirred in confusion. The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed. Even the living throne seemed to pulse with uncertainty. "You find this amusing?" asked, and for the first time there was something other than cold superiority in his voice. There was curiosity, and perhaps buried very deep the smallest hint of doubt. Composed himself, though a slight smile still played at the corners of his mouth. "Forgive me, Your Eminence. I mean no disrespect. It is simply that your declaration reminds me of something from human history." "And what is that?" "Many times throughout our past, powerful nations have declared war on smaller ones, expecting easy victory. They had more soldiers, more weapons, more resources. By every logical calculation, they should have won quickly and completely." The ambassador's smile faded, and something harder appeared in his eyes. Something that made several of the nearby representatives take an unconscious step backward. "They did not," he said simply. "Humans do not surrender easily, Your Eminence, and we have had 300 years to prepare for this moment." Emperor stared at the small human for a long moment. Then he waved his hand dismissively. "Pretty words, but words do not stop warships. Words do not save planets. You have 30 cycles, human. Use them to say goodbye to your world." Ambassador Park bowed his head again with that same polite, not quite submissive gesture. "Thank you for the audience, Your Eminence. I think you will find the next 30 cycles very educational." He turned and walked back through the chamber, past 2,000 species who watched him with a mixture of pity and confusion. He walked like a man without a care in the world, like a man who knew something that no one else in the room could possibly guess. And as he walked, he was still smiling. Fleet Admiral stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the recording of the human ambassador's speech for the 7th time. Around him, 12,000 warships of the Third Conquest Armada hung in perfect formation, their weapons powered down but ready, their crews awaiting orders. Was old for a military officer, even by standards. He had commanded fleets for over 2,000 years. He had conquered more worlds than he could easily count. He had broken the resistance of species that had seemed unbreakable, and he had done it all with cold, careful efficiency. But something about this human bothered him. "Computer, analyze the human's body language during the declaration," he ordered. The ship's intelligence processed the request and responded in a calm, neutral voice. Analysis complete. The human subject displayed no signs of elevated stress, fear, or deception. Heart rate remained steady. Pupils did not dilate. Muscle tension was minimal. The subject appeared to be genuinely calm and confident throughout the interaction. "That is not possible," muttered. He was standing before the Emperor. He had just been told his species would be destroyed. He should have been terrified. "The data is accurate, Admiral. The human was not afraid." Turned away from the display and walked to the observation window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant, and his fleet stretched across the void like a carpet of metal and fire. Any sane species would surrender immediately upon seeing such a force. The mathematics were simple and undeniable. But the human had laughed. His second-in-command, a younger officer named Talais, approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, I have compiled the intelligence reports on the human species. Shall I summarize?" "Please." Talais scrolled through the information. The humans achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 300 years ago. Since then, they have expanded to 47 star systems. Their population is estimated at 12 billion. Their visible military assets include 312 patrol vessels, 47 orbital defense platforms, and a small number of ground forces. And their weapons technology. Primitive by our standards. Their most powerful ships carry fusion-based weapons and kinetic projectiles. They have no planet crackers, no stellar manipulation technology, no dimensional weapons. Our analysis suggests that a single battle group could eliminate their entire fleet in less than one standard day. Nodded slowly. Everything Talais said matched his own calculations. The humans were outmatched in every possible way. A war against them would not even be a challenge. It would be an execution. "And yet, what do we know about their history?" he asked. Talais seemed surprised by the question. "Their history, Admiral." "Yes, before they achieved. How did they behave? How did they wage war?" The younger officer consulted his tablet. "I have limited data, but the records indicate that humans spent most of their prehistory fighting each other. They had thousands of separate nations, religions, and cultures, and they were almost constantly at war." "Constantly at war," repeated, "against each other." "Yes, Admiral. They appear to be an unusually aggressive and territorial species. Even after achieving and unifying under a single government, they maintained large military forces. Our analysts find this behavior puzzling, since they faced no external threats." Was quiet for a long moment. He had conquered many species in his long career, and he had learned to recognize patterns. Most species, when they achieved, turned their attention outward. They explored, they traded, they formed alliances. War became rare because the universe was so vast that there was no need to fight over resources. But the humans had kept their weapons ready. They had kept training their soldiers. They had kept building warships, even when there was no enemy to fight. "Why?" "There is one more thing, Admiral," Talais said carefully. "Our intelligence operatives have been unable to penetrate human space. Every agent we have sent has either disappeared or returned with no useful information. The humans appear to have extremely effective counterintelligence capabilities. That is also unusual for such a young species." "Yes, Admiral. It is as if they were expecting us, as if they have been preparing for contact with a hostile civilization for a very long time." Turned back to the observation window. His reflection stared back at him, overlaid on the stars. "Send a message to the Emperor. Tell him I recommend caution in our approach to the humans." Talais looked shocked. "Caution, Admiral, against such a weak enemy." "An enemy who does not act weak is not weak, Lieutenant. This is a lesson I have learned many times. The humans have no reason to be confident, and yet they are. Either they are fools, or they know something we do not." Far away on Earth, defense minister sat in the underground command center known only as the bunker. It was located 3 kilometers beneath the surface, protected by layers of rock, metal, and energy shields that could withstand a direct nuclear strike. Very few people knew it existed, and even fewer knew its true purpose. Around her sat the Joint Chiefs of the human military, along with a handful of scientists and intelligence officers. On the main screen, they watched the recording of Ambassador Park's performance in the Grand Chamber. "He did well," said General Bay, commander of Earth's strategic forces. He was a large man with a shaved head and eyes that had seen too many battles. The Emperor bought it completely. "The Emperor is arrogant," replied. "He believes what he wants to believe. The more important question is whether the military commanders will be as easy to fool." She turned to the intelligence officer at the end of the table, a quiet woman named Han Myra. "What do we know about the fleet admiral they have assigned to our sector?" Han Myra pulled up a file on her tablet. "His name is, he has been a fleet commander for over 2,000 years. He has never lost a campaign. Our psychological profile suggests he is cautious, intelligent, and not easily deceived." "That could be a problem. Or it could be an advantage," General Bay said. "A stupid enemy attacks without thinking. A smart enemy hesitates, looks for traps, tries to understand what he is facing. We can use that hesitation." Nodded slowly. "Has the ambassador returned safely?" "His ship entered hyperspace 10 minutes ago. He should arrive at Earth within 6 hours." "Good. When he arrives, bring him directly here. We need to discuss the next phase." She stood and walked to the main screen, which now showed a map of human space. 47 systems, scattered across a small region of the galaxy. It looked pathetically small compared to the vast territory of the Empire. But appearances, as humanity had learned long ago, could be deceiving. 300 years, said softly. "We have been preparing for this moment for 300 years. Every treaty we signed, every technology we developed, every secret we kept was all for this." She touched the screen, and the map changed. Now it showed something else entirely. Something that no alien species had ever seen. Something that had been hidden so carefully that even most humans did not know it existed. "They think they are declaring war on a weak, primitive species," she continued. "They think this will be easy. They think we will break." Her eyes hardened. "They are wrong, and before this is over, they will understand exactly how wrong they are." In orbit above a distant star, Ambassador Park sat in his small diplomatic vessel and watched the stars streak past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. He was tired. The performance in the Grand Chamber had required every bit of his skill and training. Showing no fear before the Emperor had been the hardest thing he had ever done. But it had worked. The first phase was complete. He touched a control on his armrest, and a holographic display appeared before him. It showed a simple countdown timer, marking the 30 cycles until the Empire's deadline. 30 cycles. That was approximately 45 Earth days. Not much time by galactic standards, but more than enough for what came next. Smiled to himself and closed his eyes. He needed rest. The real work was about to begin. And humanity had so much more to show them. 20 days had passed since the declaration of war, and the galaxy was watching. News of the coming conflict had spread to every corner of known space. Betting pools had formed on conquered worlds, with nearly everyone wagering on how quickly the humans would surrender. The most optimistic estimates gave humanity 2 weeks. The pessimists said 2 days. No one bet on humanity winning. That would have been insane. In the Grand Chamber of the Empire, Ambassador Park stood once again before Emperor. But this time, things were different. This time, the human had requested the audience himself, and this time there was something in his hand. It was a small device, no larger than his thumb. It looked like nothing special, just a cylinder of dark metal with a single button on its surface. But when held it up, the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. "Your Eminence," said, his voice calm and pleasant as always, "I come before you today not to surrender, but to offer you a chance to reconsider your declaration." Emperor laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound that echoed through the vast chamber. "Reconsider? You come to us, alone and unarmed, and ask us to reconsider. Perhaps your species is even more foolish than we thought." "Perhaps," agreed with a slight nod. "Or perhaps we simply know something you do not. Before you commit your fleets to this war, there is information I believe you should have." The Emperor waved his hand dismissively. "Speak, then. Amuse us with your desperation." Press the button on the device, and a holographic image appeared in the air before him. It showed Earth, humanity, spinning slowly in the void. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. It looked peaceful, fragile, utterly vulnerable. "This is Earth," said. "Our home, the cradle of our species. 12 billion people live on this world, and billions more live on the colonies we have built across 47 star systems." "We are aware of your demographics," said impatiently. "Get to the point." "The point, Your Eminence, is this." The holographic image changed. Now it showed something else, something that made many of the watching representatives lean forward in confusion. The image of Earth was still there, but now it was surrounded by a web of glowing red lines. The lines connected to every continent, every ocean, every major city. They extended outward into space, linking to satellites and stations and ships, and all of them, every single one, connected to a single pulsing point buried deep beneath the surface of the planet. 300 years ago, when humanity first discovered that we were not alone in the universe, we faced a choice, explained. We could hope that the species we would eventually meet would be peaceful and friendly, or we could prepare for the possibility that they would be hostile and powerful. He paused, and his eyes met the Emperor's four-eyed gaze directly. "We chose to prepare." "Prepare how?" asked. Despite his dismissive tone, there was a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. "We built a weapon. We called it the Prometheus Protocol, named after a figure from our mythology who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity," smiled slightly. It seemed appropriate. The holographic image expanded, showing not just Earth but all of human space. Every colony, every station, every ship was now connected by those same glowing red lines. They formed a vast network, spreading across 47 star systems like a spider's web. The Prometheus Protocol is not a single weapon. It is a system. Every human settlement, every piece of human infrastructure, every ship in our fleet is connected to it. And at the center of the system is a deadman switch. A murmur ran through the chamber. The concept of a deadman switch was not unique to humans. Many species understood the basic idea, a trigger that activated automatically if it was not regularly reset. But no species had ever built one on this scale. If humanity is conquered, if our government falls, if we lose the ability to reset the switch, the Prometheus Protocol activates automatically, continued. And when it activates, it does not simply destroy our own territory. The holographic image changed again. Now it showed the entire galaxy, with the Empire's territory marked in blue and human space marked in red. But spreading outward from human space, like ripples in a pond, was a wave of orange light. "We have spent 3 centuries developing stellar manipulation technology, not weapons that destroy planets, Your Eminence, weapons that destroy stars." The chamber went absolutely silent. Even Emperor seemed frozen on his throne. "The Prometheus Protocol is designed to trigger a chain reaction in the galactic core," said. "If it activates, it will cause approximately 90% of all stars in this region of the galaxy to go nova within 100 years. This includes every star in the Empire." He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "To be clear, this is not a threat. If the Prometheus Protocol activates, humanity dies too. Every human world will be consumed along with every world. We are not offering you a choice between victory and defeat. We are offering you a choice between peace and mutual extinction. Admiral, watching the broadcast from his flagship, felt something he had not felt in centuries. It was fear. True, deep, primal fear. He turned to his tactical officer. Analyze the human's claims. Is such a weapon possible? The officer worked frantically at his console. Admiral, stellar manipulation technology is theoretically possible, but it would require energy levels and engineering capabilities far beyond anything we have observed in human space. Our assessment is that the humans do not have the resources to build such a weapon. But is it possible? The officer hesitated. Yes, Admiral, it is possible. Difficult, expensive, requiring centuries of secret development, but possible. Stared at the screen where the human ambassador was still speaking. The man showed no signs of deception. His heart rate was steady. His pupils were not dilated. He believed what he was saying. Or he was the greatest actor in the history of the galaxy. Back in the Grand Chamber, Emperor had finally recovered his composure. You expect us to believe this? You expect us to believe that a species barely 3 centuries old has developed technology that we have not mastered in 10,000 years? No, Your Eminence, replied calmly. I expect you to doubt me. I expect you to think this is a bluff. That is why we have prepared a demonstration. He touched his communicator. Dr. Shin, please proceed. 12,000 light-years away, in a star system that the Empire had as uninhabited, a small human research station orbited a yellow star. Dr. Shin sat at her console, surrounded by her team of scientists, and waited for the signal. When it came, she did not hesitate. She had spent her entire adult life preparing for this moment. 40 years of research, 40 years of testing, 40 years of making sure that when the time came, everything would work exactly as designed. Initiating stellar manipulation sequence, she announced to her team. Core destabilization in progress. On her screen, data streams showed the energy being channeled into the star's core. It was a delicate process, requiring precise calculations and perfect timing. Too little energy and nothing would happen. Too much and the reaction would be uncontrollable. But knew exactly what she was doing. In the Grand Chamber, the holographic display shifted to show a live feed of the target star. It looked ordinary, a medium-sized yellow star with no remarkable features. This system has no habitable planets, narrated. No strategic value, no population. We chose it specifically because its destruction will harm no one. As the representatives watched, the star began to change. Its surface, normally calm and steady, started to ripple and churn. Massive flares erupted from its surface. Its color shifted from yellow to orange to angry, violent red. What is happening? Someone in the crowd asked, their voice trembling. We are killing it, replied simply. The star collapsed in on itself for a single moment. Then it exploded. It was not a natural death. Natural stellar explosions took millions of years to develop. This was something else entirely. The star simply detonated, releasing a wave of energy so powerful that it would sterilize everything within 30 light-years. On the screen, the blast wave expanded outward, consuming everything in its path. Small moons, asteroids, debris, all of it was vaporized in an instant. Where there had been a star, there was now only an expanding cloud of fire and radiation. The chamber remained silent for a very long time. Ambassador Park straightened his suit and looked up at Emperor. The Emperor's 4 eyes were wide, and for the first time in 10,000 years, there was uncertainty on his ancient face. That was one star, Your Eminence said. We have the ability to do the same to millions. And if humanity falls, the Prometheus Protocol will do exactly that. He smiled pleasantly. Now, shall we discuss alternative arrangements? The explosion of the star changed everything. Within hours, the recording of the demonstration had spread to every corner of the galaxy. Species that had been conquered by the Empire watched in stunned silence. Free civilizations on the edges of known space analyzed the footage again and again, trying to understand what they had seen. And in the heart of the Empire itself, panic began to spread. Emperor retreated to his private chambers immediately after the demonstration. He dismissed his advisors, his guards, even the servants who had attended him for centuries. He sat alone in the darkness, his four eyes staring at nothing, and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. For 10,000 years, the Empire had ruled through simple mathematics. They had more ships, more soldiers, more resources than any enemy they faced. Victory was never a question. It was simply a calculation. Add up the numbers, deploy the appropriate forces, and collect the surrender. But the humans had broken the mathematics. They had introduced a variable that could not be calculated, a weapon that made victory and defeat equally catastrophic. It was not war anymore. It was suicide dressed in military uniforms. 3 days after the demonstration, summoned his High Council to discuss the situation. The council consisted of the 12 most powerful individuals in the Empire, after the Emperor himself. Fleet admirals, planetary governors, intelligence chiefs, all of them gathered in a sealed chamber to debate humanity's fate. "We cannot simply ignore this threat," said Admiral, who had been given the honor of addressing the council first. "The demonstration was real. Our scientists have analyzed the data. The humans have somehow developed stellar manipulation technology centuries ahead of their apparent capabilities." "Then where did it come from?" demanded Governor, who controlled 30 systems in the outer territories. "Species do not simply invent such technology. It takes thousands of years of development. Either the humans have been lying about their history, or someone gave them this weapon." "We have found no evidence of outside assistance," replied Intelligence Chief. "Our agents have been trying to penetrate human space since first contact. They have found nothing. Either the humans have no secrets, or they have secrets we cannot uncover." "That is the same thing," pointed out. "If we cannot uncover their secrets, we must assume those secrets are dangerous." The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued for immediate attack, believing the Prometheus Protocol was a bluff. Others argued for withdrawal, unwilling to risk the destruction of the entire empire over a single small species. Still others proposed compromise, suggesting that the humans might be convinced to share their technology in exchange for peace. Through it all, Emperor sat in silence, listening to his advisors argue back and forth. He had ruled for 10,000 years. He had faced rebellions, invasions, plagues, and disasters of every kind. He had always found a solution, a way to maintain the empire's power and his own control. But this was different. This was not an enemy that could be defeated or intimidated. This was an enemy that had chosen to make defeat impossible by making victory equally catastrophic. Finally, he raised his hand, and the chamber fell silent. "Contact the human ambassador," he said quietly. "Tell him we are prepared to negotiate." On Earth, the news of the Emperor's decision arrived at exactly the moment Defense Minister had predicted. She had spent 20 years studying the Empire, learning their psychology, their decision-making processes, their weaknesses. She knew how they thought, and she knew how they would react. "The Emperor is scared," she told the Joint Chiefs in the bunker. "For the first time in his very long life, he is facing a situation where his power means nothing. He will negotiate because he has no other choice." "And if he does not negotiate in good faith?" asked General Bay. "If this is just a trick to buy time while they develop a counter to the protocol?" "Then we proceed with the contingency plans. But I do not think it will come to that. They are not evil. They are simply powerful, and they have never had to consider the possibility that power alone is not enough." Ambassador Park had returned to the capital to begin negotiations. He was accompanied this time by a small team of diplomats and advisors, including a young woman named who served as his personal assistant. Was 28 years old, brilliant and ambitious, and she had never been off Earth before this mission. Everything about the capital amazed her. The towering spires that reached into the clouds, the ships that flew through the air like birds, the alien species that walked the streets in endless variety. But she also saw things that Ambassador Park had warned her about. She saw the conquered peoples, the species that had been absorbed into the empire and forced to serve. She saw the fear in their eyes when soldiers walked past. She saw the way they bowed their heads and stepped aside, making themselves small and invisible. "Is this what they wanted for us?" she asked one evening as they walked through the diplomatic quarter. "Yes," he replied simply. "This is exactly what they wanted. We would have been just another conquered species, our culture erased, our people scattered, our history forgotten. In a few centuries, no one would even remember that humans had once been free. But we stopped them." "We stopped them," agreed. "For now, the negotiations will determine whether we stop them permanently." The negotiations were long and difficult. They were not accustomed to treating other species as equals, and they struggled to adjust their approach. They kept trying to dictate terms, to impose conditions, to maintain some form of dominance over the relationship. Each time, politely reminded them that the Prometheus Protocol was still active, and that humanity was under no obligation to accept anything less than complete independence. After 3 weeks of talks, the basic framework of a treaty began to emerge. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign civilization, with the same rights and privileges as the empire itself. There would be no tribute, no integration, no submission of any kind. The two civilizations would exist as equals, trading and communicating, but neither ruling the other. It was unprecedented. In 10,000 years of galactic history, nothing like it had ever happened. Back on Earth, Dr. Shin sat in her laboratory and watched the news feeds from the negotiations. She was exhausted. The demonstration had required years of preparation and months of precise calibration. Destroying that star had been the culmination of her life's work. And yet, as she watched the diplomats talk and argue and slowly inch toward peace, she felt something she had not expected. She felt doubt. Her assistant, a young man named O, noticed her expression. "Is something wrong, doctor?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" "What do you mean?" "We built a weapon capable of destroying the galaxy. We threatened to use it if anyone attacked us, and now we are being treated as equals because of that threat." She shook her head slowly. "Is that how civilization should work? Is that the kind of species we want to be?" Considered the question carefully. "I think it is the kind of species we have to be," he said finally. "The galaxy is not fair, Doctor. The strong dominate the weak. That is how it has always worked. We simply found a way to be strong enough that no one could dominate us. But at what cost? We have the power to destroy everything. What does that do to us? What kind of people do we become when we hold that kind of power?" Did not have an answer for that. Neither did. In the capital, the final day of negotiations arrived. Ambassador Park sat across the table from Emperor himself, surrounded by advisors and diplomats from both sides. The treaty document lay between them, waiting for signatures. "Before we sign," said slowly, "I must ask you a question, human, and I want an honest answer." Nodded, "Ask." "Would you really do it? If we had attacked, if we had conquered your worlds and killed your people, would you really have activated the protocol? Would you really have destroyed the galaxy just to avoid defeat?" Was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but certain. "Yes, Your Eminence, we would have." Stared at him with all four eyes. Why? What could possibly be worth such destruction? Freedom, replied simply. Humans would rather die than live as slaves. We would rather see the universe burn than kneel to a conqueror. It is not rational. It is not logical. It is simply who we are. The emperor was quiet for a long time. Then slowly he reached for the treaty document. Perhaps, he said, it is time the galaxy learned to respect such determination. He signed his name, and 10,000 years of galactic history changed forever. The Treaty of Saul was signed on a clear morning in the Grand Chamber of the Empire. Representatives from 2,000 worlds watched as Emperor and Ambassador Park placed their signatures on the document that would change the galaxy forever. When it was done, there was no applause, no celebration. There was only silence and the weight of history pressing down on everyone present. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Empire had acknowledged another species as its equal. In the days that followed, the galaxy struggled to understand what had happened. News feeds analyzed the treaty from every angle. Scholars debated its implications. Conquered species whispered among themselves, wondering if this meant their own situation might change. And humanity, the small species that had somehow stood against the greatest power in the galaxy, went back to their lives as if nothing remarkable had occurred. Ambassador Park remained in the capital for another month, helping to establish the framework for future relations between the two civilizations. It was delicate work, requiring patience and careful attention to detail. They were proud and powerful, and they did not adapt easily to treating another species as an equal. But slowly, day by day, the relationship began to take shape. Fleet Admiral requested a private meeting with 3 weeks after the treaty signing. They met in a small garden near the diplomatic quarter, surrounded by plants from 100 different worlds. It was a peaceful place, far from the grandeur and intimidation of the Grand Chamber. Was different here. Without his uniform and his fleet at his back, he seemed smaller, older, more uncertain. He had spent 2,000 years as a conqueror, and now he was trying to understand a species that had refused to be conquered. I have studied your species extensively since the demonstration, he said, his voice quieter than had ever heard it. I have read your history, your literature, your philosophy. I have tried to understand how you think, how you make decisions, what drives you. And what have you concluded? Asked. His mandibles clicked in a gesture that had learned indicated frustration. I do not understand you. Not truly. Every other species in the galaxy, when faced with overwhelming force, does the sensible thing. They calculate the odds. They recognize they cannot win. They surrender. It is logical. It is reasonable. It is sane. He paused, his compound eyes fixed on space. But humans would rather see the universe burn than kneel. That is not a threat I am making, Ambassador. It is an observation. You are a species of beings who would genuinely destroy everything rather than accept defeat, and I do not understand how such a species can exist. Considered his response carefully. He had thought about this question many times over the years. It was the question that defined humanity in some ways. Do you know what spite is, Admiral? Tilted his head. I am familiar with the concept. Malicious behavior motivated by a desire to harm others, even at cost to oneself. That is the dictionary definition, yes. But for humans, spite is something more. It is a fundamental part of who we are, smiled slightly. We hold grudges across generations. We remember insults for centuries. We will absolutely hurt ourselves if it means hurting our enemies more. That is irrational. Yes, it is, and it is also why you could not defeat us, leaned forward slightly. Every species in your empire surrendered because they were rational. They calculated the odds, saw they could not win, and chose to survive. That was the logical choice. But humans are not entirely rational, Admiral. We have this voice inside us that says, I would rather die than let you win. And sometimes that voice is louder than logic. Was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, he inclined his head in a gesture of acknowledgement. I believe, he said carefully, that the Empire made the correct decision in seeking peace. I am glad we understand each other. They parted on friendly terms, or as friendly as a former conqueror and former target could be. It was a start. Perhaps in time it would become something more. On Earth, the celebrations had ended, and life was returning to normal. But for those who knew the truth, things would never be entirely normal again. Defense Minister stood in her office, looking out at the city below. It was a beautiful day, with clear skies and warm sunshine. Children played in the parks. People went about their business. Ships rose and fell from the spaceport on the horizon. None of them knew how close they had come to destruction. None of them knew about the 300 years of preparation, the secret facilities, the technology that should have been impossible. None of them knew about the Prometheus Protocol and what it really meant. And perhaps that was for the best. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She turned to find Ambassador Park entering, looking tired but satisfied. "Welcome home," she said. "The negotiations went well." "Better than expected. They are proud, but they are not stupid. They understand that the old way of doing things is over. For now," his voice was cautious, "they will adapt. They will look for ways to neutralize the protocol. They will not accept being equals forever." "No, they will not, but that is a problem for another day." Settled into a chair, and for the first time since had known him, he looked his age. "For now, we have peace, real peace. Our children and will grow up in a galaxy where humanity is respected, not conquered. That is worth something." Nodded slowly. Then she asked the question that had been bothering her for weeks. "They bought it. The Emperor, the admirals, the entire empire. They believed the protocol was real." "Yes." "Do you ever feel guilty? Bluffing the entire galaxy with a weapon we could never actually use. The demonstration was real, but the protocol itself, the Deadman's Switch, the chain reaction that would destroy the galaxy. That was all theater, was it not?" Was quiet for a very long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm and steady. "Minister, who said anything about bluffing?" Felt the blood drain from her face. She had been a government official for 30 years. She had access to the highest levels of classified information. She knew every secret that humanity had. Or she thought she did. "The demonstration was not theater," continued quietly. "We really did develop stellar manipulation technology. We really did build a network connecting every human settlement. And we really did create a Deadman's Switch that will trigger a galactic chain reaction if humanity falls. But that is insane. The protocol would kill us too. Why would anyone build such a thing?" Smiled, and there was something in that smile that had never seen before. Something old and hard and utterly certain. "Because humans are insane, Minister. We really would rather see the galaxy burn than surrender. The thought it was a bluff because no rational species would build such a weapon. But we are not rational. We are spiteful, stubborn, vindictive creatures who will drag the entire universe into oblivion rather than accept defeat." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the same peaceful city that had been watching. "The protocol is real. It has always been real. And now, for the first time in history, the galaxy knows that there is a species that cannot be conquered. Not because we are stronger, not because we have better weapons, but because we are crazy enough to end everything rather than lose." Stared at his back, her mind spinning. Everything she thought she knew about the situation was wrong. The bluff was not a bluff. The weapon was real. And somewhere deep beneath her feet, a countdown timer was ticking, waiting, ready to end everything if humanity ever faced defeat. "Some secrets," said softly, "are better left unspoken. The protocol will never be officially acknowledged. It will remain a rumor, a legend, something that other species whisper about but can never confirm. That uncertainty is our greatest protection." He turned back to face her, and his expression softened slightly. "Go home, Minister. Spend time with your family. Enjoy the peace we have won, and try not to think too much about what made it possible." He walked out of the office, leaving standing alone with her thoughts and a secret that she wished she had never learned. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Humanity had survived. Humanity had won. And somewhere in the depths of space, connected to every human heart and home, the Prometheus Protocol waited in silence. Ready, patient, eternal, because humans would rather see the universe burn than kneel. And now, the galaxy would never forget it.